This kind of singing is an American tradition, a cappella, four-part hymn singing. It began in New England, specifically as a response to the old lining out of hymns, and the singing had gotten very degraded and unsatisfactory. And so a number of genius musicians and entrepreneurs adopted a style of writing music in these four parts and sing a cappella, because the theology at the time did not allow instruments into the churches other than the instrument that God gave each of us, which was our voice. And in 1803, a couple of other geniuses came up with the idea of writing notes on a staff using shapes rather than the simple oval for everything, using four different shapes that people could learn to sing very quickly. And the shapes that they use is a triangle, which looks like a flag, so we call that a fa. The second shape is an oval, which looks like the sun, so we call that sol. Third shape is a square or a rectangle, which looks like a couple of L's put together, and so we call that la. And then the fourth note is a diamond, which for whatever reason we called mi. And so the scale would be written with using these shapes, so you would sing fa, sol, la, mi, fa.
Convinced as a sinner to Jesus I come, informed by the gospel for such there is room, overwhelmed with the sorrows for sin I will cry, lead me to the rock that is higher than I, higher than I, higher than I, lead me to the rock that is higher than I.
So we sing the shapes first, going through it once, and then we launch in and do the words. Perhaps all the verses of the song, perhaps one or two. And then when the song is over, that leader sits down and someone else stands up and calls the next song and does the same thing again. In the course of a 2-hour weekly singing here in the Twin Cities, we may get through maybe 20, 25 songs maybe in the course of an hour, and we sing for 2 hours. When we host all-day singings, which we do 3 times a year, we have an all-day singing in February, one in July, and then we have 2 all-day singings back-to-back on a weekend in September, the Minnesota State Convention. We will sing upwards of 85 to 90 songs over the course of a day. We begin singing about 9:30 and stop about 3:30 with a dinner on the grounds in the lunch. That's what we in Minnesota would call a potluck, but in the Sacred Heart community is called dinner on the grounds. Anyway, beginning in 1803 with the Easy Instructor, this kind of music began to be written in oblong songbooks like this. And in 1844, this book was published called The Sacred Harp. And as you can see, it's oblong because each of the 4 parts has to have its own line to sing, because the parts will cross each other. Sometimes the one part will go up while the other part is crossing below. And so, but you can sort of see how the notes are written using the different shapes. In 1844, this book, The Sacred Harp, was published. At the time, it was one of a score or a couple of score of different shape note songbooks that were in circulation in the United States. After having begun in New England, it largely settled in the South. And importantly, even though the tradition began with church people trying to improve congregational singing in the churches, where it really took off was as social singing in communities. Singing teachers, itinerant singing teachers, would come to a town for a couple of weeks. They would board with someone local in town, and 5 nights a week after the work was done, they would lead singing schools of 2 or 3 hours a night, where they would drill mostly young singers, mostly young people, in how to read the music, and they would practice intervals, and by the time the singers left, they would be able, with books that he hoped that they would buy from them, these new trained young singers would be able to sing in their own community. And over time, various practices grew up regarding shape note singing. And one of the most important parts of the ethos of shape note singing that eventually developed was one of a really radical democracy. Rather, in many local communities around the country, again, primarily in the South, but over the last 30 years, it has spread throughout the North, as well as in countries of Europe and elsewhere around the world. Small communities will get together periodically. In Minnesota, we get together every Tuesday and 3 of the 4 Sundays a month. Some places sing once a month, some places have weekly singings, where they will get together in a public room, usually, sometimes in people's homes, and they will sit in the 4 square. We call it the hollow square, with the 4 parts facing each other: the bass, the trebles, which is the high harmony, the tenors, which is sung by men and women, which is the melody, and then the altos face them. And they sing. They simply sing. They don't practice. They don't rehearse. They don't perform. So if you walk into a local shape note singing almost anywhere in the country, and I'll just use our example here in Minneapolis, St. Paul, you would see a group of anywhere from 8 to 10 to 30 or 40 people, depending on the nature of the evening. And at the appointed hour, someone would stand up and call a number. They would call a number of a song in the book. And someone who is appointed or who assumes the responsibility will sound out the first note or the first chord of the song. Fa, la, sol, la, fa, sol, fa. And that will give each of the 4 parts. That will set the pitch for the song. Hopefully it's in a range that's not too high for the high voices and not too growly for the basses down on the bottom, but is in the middle. And they will launch into singing the song. And as you'll see, as you watch the film later of the singing that we filmed here, we always sing the shapes first. So we'll sing fa, fa, mi, sol, la, sol, fa, sol, fa, or whatever it would be, the 4 parts together. It serves a number of functions. That gives you a rehearse, that tells you whether or not you're actually pitched in the right range. But the real reason that we do it is that it's tradition. It's what we do.
The music is definitely what draws us in initially. After you get drawn in, what keeps you there is the community. That community can be both our immediate local community, whom you get to know well, but also the community of singers throughout the country and even internationally.
The community that will always be there for you. And no matter how you fade in and out of Sacred Harp and how your life gets busy or you don't have time to travel around and see people, you know that they're always there for you. They'll always be there for you to come back to.
time is one of those things that is done by the leader to set the tempo, as you would have with a conductor in any choral or orchestral setting. But in Sacred Harp, you also have a lot of the people who are sitting in the square will beat time. And with beating time, it does several things. It helps keep everybody together. You're in a large setting and you're not having everybody always being able to see. So with beating time, if you are sitting in the alto section where the leader has their back to you, you look across the square at the tenors whom the leader is facing, and you can pick up the time from them. It also helps keep you in rhythm as you're looking at your book, because you might be singing a song you've never sung before. So you're looking at your book, but if you're beating time and just occasionally look up to make sure you're keeping time with people, then that will keep you in there. I've also found at the end of an all-day singing, you've been singing already for 5 or 6 hours, if you are beating time, it helps re-energize you too, as any time motion does with people.
Well, and at any time during the singing, having the entire, if you get every single person in that front row on all sections beating time, it just pulls the energy out of people. It's not a performance. It is all about us coming together as a group and singing. The leader is not up there to perform. The leader is there to facilitate the moment that we all come together. And the more that we are all participating in that and beating time, the more we're able to come together as a group.
A lot of people come to Sacred Harp, come to Shape Note singing because it's an interesting folk music kind of tradition, and they sort of approach it as a folk music thing. And I think that may have been part of my initial motivation. But it didn't take long until I realized that while the singing was the central part of what we did, around the central part, there was a bond between the people that sang. And we have formed a very, very loving, very strong community of singers, by which on just a few days' notice we could assemble 10 to come and sing for you today. Singers who come and sing for each other when we are ill, and sometimes even on our deathbeds we have assembled singings for each other, or to celebrate weddings, and just all the normal things of life. We can come together and sing this song with the exuberance and joy and energy that comes from doing something as participants and, as I like to say, creators of culture, not simply consumers of culture. And one of the things that you would have to get used to if you want to do Shape Note singing is being part of it, and just doing the singing and coming and screwing up a song and not worrying about it, and we come back and we do it a little bit better next week, the next time we sing it. There's no auditions. You can come when you can. You can leave when you have to. It's a very low barrier to entry. I like to think of it as a low commitment, very high reward.
Draws on such a big population. I mean, not that there are lots of people around the world who do it, but you get people from everywhere. You get people from different parts of the country, from different faiths, and you get all ages. And it's something where you can participate fully at any age. We have kids who were born a couple days ago. You know, we have infants there, and we have singers who come up until their dying day. and are just as much of a community as they have been their entire lives. It's not meant to be polished or perfect sounding. Sometimes that means that you're louder or quieter than your neighbor, but it's not about yelling. It's not about being the loudest that you can be. It's about letting yourself go and being able to sing fully. That's why it's an expression of everything coming out of your body. The sound coming out of your mouth and people beating time, tapping their feet, it's being able to let go and do whatever feels natural.
273, 273. La, fa, la, fa, la.
When you get a lot of people coming together, actually, whether it's a small group, 4 people sitting around singing, or 150 people at a convention, it's a very powerful thing. It is different. In the large singing, there's something exciting about having that number of people all working together on something. In the very small, intimate setting, you're sitting around the dining room table and singing songs with people. It's intense. It's a connection. It's not about you as an individual. It's not about you as the leader or as a singer. It's about the community. And what happens within, we refer to the hollow square. You have the 4 parts seated around the hollow square. What happens in that hollow square is a very sacred thing. It's where people meet. It goes beyond all of our differences. All of those differences get set aside at the door. And in the singing, it helps us recognize the humanity in each other. From there, if we can do that, if we can recognize the humanity in each other, then we have hope for moving the world forward too. So to me, the singing it's a vehicle. It's a vehicle that I love very much, but it is also a vehicle for doing something deeper.
There's something beautiful about singing the same songs over and over again. You know, sometimes in any sort of music, and sometimes in Sacred Harp too, people feel like we need to get new songs in there and try something different. But there's something wonderful about singing those same songs that you've been singing since childhood, that you don't have to think about, and it allows you to engage with everyone across the square, to engage with the music so much more powerfully. You aren't having to think about what you're singing. You're able to just be in the moment.